He hasn't cued yet.
Take two.
Take two. Hello, certainly would like to welcome everyone here. This is just a presentation to inform folks, residents of the town, what the fire department does. And as the ballot question comes up, this isn't a forum to tell you how to vote. This is a forum just to give you information about what a paramedic is, what our hours of service are like, and the makeup of the department. We can answer any questions that you have, anything at all. Certainly there's nothing that I want you to leave unasked. And just want to welcome you here. My name is John Workman. I'm fire chief for Southampton. My Lieutenant Torrey, does the public education for the department and is going to do a presentation for you tonight. So thank you for coming.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. As the Chief said, my name is Lieutenant Alan Torrey. I'm a lieutenant here on the fire department. I've been with the department since 2007 as a full-fledged member. I was also, back in the day, I was also a junior firefighter. We had a junior firefighter program, which I served in for 4 years before becoming an active member. I take this very seriously. I have a strong heart about all this. I grew up in Southampton, and as we look forward to Monday's election, we're just hoping to get some information out to you folks that are here and also viewing from home. Also here tonight we do have a couple other members of our fire department to show that we are in fact indeed one big family. And really that's all it comes down to is our family as a fire department helping your family in your time of need. So without further ado, we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes of it, if you will. It's Southampton Fire Department, who we are and what we do. So some topics that we're going to be going over tonight is the current Southampton fire staffing, how we're staffed currently, the different positions that we have on the medical side of things, such as what an EMT basic is and what their training is, what they can and cannot do. After that, we're going to talk about what a paramedic is, what their training level is, and what they can and cannot do for you during an emergency. We're going to go, again, over the differences between the two. And then we're going to get into how we respond to calls between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., and how we respond to calls currently between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m., which we'll get into. And then we're going to talk also about the ballot question staffing and how that would impact our department. And then lastly, we're going to, but definitely probably the most important bullet here is how this is going to impact the citizens of Southampton, what this means for the folks that live here. So a lot of people, when you talk to them about Southampton Fire, they don't realize that the fire department only has one full-time employee. The only full-time employee for the town of Southampton is our fire chief. The rest of us are all part-time help. Most of us have 2, maybe even 3 jobs on the side that we do outside of here, and that leaves us with 40 part-time employees, which is broken down into 1 deputy fire chief who assists the chief with some administrative work, 2 fire captains who handle the training aspects of the department, 4 lieutenants who have jobs based on how the chief needs to differentiate certain aspects of it, such as myself. I take care of the public education, and I also take care of the fire public education at the Norris School. So if any of you are sitting at home or here in the audience and have seen or heard of Firefighter Alan, that is myself. I've been doing that, again, since 2008 with the SAFE program. We do get grants every year for that. And then we break it down even further into 33 firefighters and or EMTs. So that leaves us with 41 people covering EMS and fire calls for 6,000 citizens roughly. That leaves us also with 5,110 hours being covered with on-call personnel who are responding from home every year. In 2015, excuse me, in 2015 as of April 6th, total calls for service were at 152. In 2016, the same time frame, we were seeing an influx of up to 40 calls, by total number being 191 calls for service. As of today's date, I believe we are at 237 calls for service. That's fire EMS for the town of Southampton, starting since January 1. So current staffing level during the daytime, this is going to be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We have 2 firefighters that come on shift at 8 a.m. One is a paramedic and one is an EMT, basic. There are days occasionally where we do have 2 paramedics working, but those days are few and far between. We are staffed at the station 7 days a week, Sunday to Sunday, including holidays. All of your major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of those that most folks have off to spend with their families, we are here staffing the station from 8 in the morning till 5 at night. And they're not just sitting in a recliner and not doing anything and waiting for a tone to come in. We have daily apparatus checks that we have to be doing. We maintain some of our own equipment in-house to save on costs. We maintain some of the fire trucks ourselves. There's certain things that we can do on each apparatus, on each piece of equipment, that keeps it in-house to try and shave off some of that cost to the town. Maintaining the station, which we try our best to do. I won't get on that. That's a separate issue for another night. But we do maintain the station as much as we can. And we do what's called pre-planning for fire and medical events. That is, there are some days where we set up to go tour a facility, such as the Harley shop on Route 10, Big Y is another good one, even the town hall here. And we get a location, or basically a map out of where things are if an emergency ever came in. We know where the gas shutoffs are. We know where the light switches are. We know where we can disconnect power to a certain area of the building. If a building such as this has a sprinkler system, we know where the sprinkler system shutoff is. So that way we don't fill the whole place up with water and wreck a beautiful new building that we just finished paying for. Okay? So both day employees are trained for EMS and fire responses. They are cross-trained. So whatever call comes in, we're ready to roll out the door right then and there with either an ambulance or a fire engine. All of our crews carry a radio with them, a portable radio, and we do have base radios set up in the station as well that alert crews to emergency calls. So when a call comes in, the dispatch center, which is located in the old town hall, throws out what's called a tone to alert us that there is a call, and then they announce what call it is, and then we respond with the appropriate piece of equipment. So the average response time from us leaving the station to when we're at your door is 1 to 3 minutes. So 1 to 3 minutes after you call 911, between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., we will be at your doorstep with either a fire engine or an ambulance, whichever you need, to answer that call for service and to get you the help that you need. And then the shift ends at 5 p.m. Now, this isn't saying that if a call comes in at 4:45, the call's not going to go unanswered, or if the call comes in at 4:59, we don't answer the call. Our crews will answer the call, do the call, and then we'll return home at the conclusion of the event. So all the calls are getting answered. We don't just stop at 5 p.m. because it's a magic number, and nobody waves a wand and says, no, that's it. Okay? So we're going to get into current staffing at nighttime. So this is between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. when the next day crew comes on. So 2 firefighters per night is what we like to, 2 firefighters per night is what we like to have on shift. And this is if they're available. We like to have them from an 8-hour minimum from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. if no one is available for the full shift. There are some nights that I like to make note that we do have multiple folks covering from certain hours. Somebody might cover from 5 to 7, somebody might cover from 7 to 10, and then swap it out like that as well. So we constantly try to have the entire night covered. In today's society, this is getting harder and harder to do. Like I said in the beginning, most folks have 2 or 3 other jobs that they're doing just to make ends meet. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we'll cover some more in detail on why that is later on in the presentation. To meet a state violation of the signed town agreement, the chief was able to allocate a double standby for an EMT if they were willing to pick up a 16-hour shift covering from 5 p.m., which is the end of the day shift, as I said, to 8 a.m., which is the beginning of the next day shift. So the folks are getting a little bit of a stipend for that, and I'm going to switch over now to the chief that's going to elaborate a little bit more on that.
I think that one point is probably worth a little bit more detail. As you said, it's a second and third job for folks, and so it is a challenge in a modern society for people to be available in uniform with a radio, ready to run out the door when the tone goes out. And so we'll take people, ideally the shift is 6 to 6, a 12-hour shift. If no one is available, we take them for 8 hours minimum. Well, you can get a standby stipend for 8 hours minimum. The trouble we're having, though, is if you're 2 or 3 people just to cover one slot for that shift, it becomes extremely complicated and difficult to do. And as we had gaps, 2-3 hour gaps at different times, if a call came in during those gaps, then that call then gets transferred on to another fire department. There's a mutual aid system set up which all fire departments use. Even Westfield, large department, covers most of their calls, but even they, if they've got out of one station, if their ambulances are going on calls, they'll get other communities. Certainly Easthampton, everyone does that same thing. In Southampton, we're a small community where we don't have the staffing. There's only one full-time staff, and so we really are dependent on people's jobs to have them available here in town. One thing that we had realized was a bit of we had a little extra funding because of the change in ambulance service that had happened earlier in the year. And with that extra funding, in order to meet the state had given us a violation and said, you're not covering calls as much as you need to. And so to answer that, we took some of that funding and we offered folks a double standby pay if they would then, and I'm probably getting ahead of his slides a little bit here, but if they would pick up from the end of day shift until the start of day shift. So if they pick up a 16-hour slot, they'd get a double standby. It's not a miracle cure. It's only in effect until the end of June, and then we have to readdress that issue if we don't have a second shift come July 1st. But what it did do is it allowed some folks who were working another job to then take a nighttime shift and earn a decent rate to keep them in town. So if they're with their family, dressed, ready to go, we have 2 of the folks on shift here tonight. And that's how they probably hang out in their living room, is with radios and all of their uniform on from 5 p.m. until 8 a.m. in the morning. So that's kind of where that violation, where that 16 hours of coverage comes in and how long it lasts for. Does that make sense to you folks? Is there any questions about that? Because I've had some.
Yeah, and does the state require that people on standby be paid?
They don't require that people on standby are paid. The challenges that you have are that there's less and less folks available to volunteer.
I was referring, like you said, after July 1st, we will be in violation with the state if no staffing pay is...
In that wording should probably be, we have the potential to be in violation of the state.
Okay.
Because basically, we're going to lose the ability to pay folks. They're going to have to, they're trying to earn money for their families. They're probably going to be starting to pick back up the shifts that they were giving up to be here in Southampton. We're talking a double shift is only $100. So it's not for 16 hours of coverage. So it's not a tremendous amount, but we've got some dedicated young kids here that are Southampton kids that have come up through the system that would prefer to work for Southampton, would prefer to respond to the folks, and they know their neighbors, their relatives. I think just to pick on Megan Pike for a second, if I may. Mm-hmm. Megan's a great example. I mean, when I first came in, Megan was on a shift team that she was mandated to cover certain nights, and it all fell on a half a dozen people to cover all the nights. When the town had signed in with the agreement and the town had started down the direction of getting paramedic coverage, Megan spent, and he'll get into this later in the slide also, so I'm getting ahead, but she spent a bunch of her own money. I mean, we're talking, $6,000 to $10,000 worth of paramedic training that she undertook, and it's a 2.5-year program. From the time that the town started to make that change, Megan just got her paramedic, which is congratulations. And she's doing ride time because a paramedic, even with all of that training that they have, which is quite additional, and we'll see more later, she still needs all the patient contact. She still needs the time. So, she'll be doing her ride time doing that, both with this department and most of our paramedics work for another service also, because the amount of patient contact that you need is very high. And again, I'm probably skipping, and Alan's probably going to give me the look saying, you're over here above. Did that answer your question?
It did. I have other questions, but maybe I should wait until you finish your presentation.
Sure.
If you find them appropriate, just speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. Raise your hand like we did all did in grade school. And I'll be more than happy to stop and answer any questions. So thank you, Chief. So as the Chief said, this is only in place until July 1st. After July 1st, we do have the option of, maybe option is not the right word, but we may be in violation with the state again if there's no staffing plan in place.
I'm sorry, in what way would you be in violation?
The agreement that the town had signed into was that we would have coverage for basically 24/7. And the goal of it was a 3-year step program to get to paramedic level service coverage for that time. The trouble, Southampton, we're a small town, so we don't have a lot of medics that live in town. We're talking, I don't know, what is it, 3 or 4 medics that can, sign up and do this kind of thing. When we went the direction, we've got some young kids that are going towards medic and getting there, so we'll have more medics available as we move forward. But then the next trouble is, we're not a full-time position for anyone. And so Megan had just gotten her paramedic, but her full-time position won't be with Southampton Fire. Her full-time position will be somewhere else. So the challenge to meet the state agreement of paramedic care throughout, we can't just rely on, maybe as we get more 6 people, to do all of the paramedic coverage for 16 hours on a $100 stipend. Yeah, this is, she invested thousands of dollars into her education, and she's available. We have a minimum of 4 nights that folks sign up for to be available for nighttime coverage. If we have gaps in that coverage, that's when, because we're at the end of our 3 years, and we are supposed to have that paramedic level service, if it's not available, the state, they had written us a violation earlier that said you're not, performing to this level. And so that's why I had allocated money that was available to pay a stipend to get folks in to cover that slot. So that money will be gone at the end of June. Doesn't mean that we will be in violation, and I apologize for that slide, because it just says that we have...
Violation would occur if
we're not
sure
covering
them that you had coverage.
Exactly. If we're not picking up, if we don't have people available. So if I have to, if Megan comes in and all of a sudden, instead of paying her for $100, we pay her $50, she's going to find another job because she spent a bunch on her program, and you don't blame her. She's going to give the time that she can afford. And I think that we're very fortunate with some good folks, but it's unrealistic to expect them to work for free this day and age. I think years past, I think you had a larger volunteer contingent, and people had more time to dedicate into a fire or ambulance service. But it's a national trend that we're really, the fire service is running up against, that we don't have that kind of availability of time for folks to pick that up. So I apologize for the slide and how it's stated. It's just that we have the potential to have that violation because of lack of coverage, lack of pay.
I have a
Sure.
follow-up question on that. You use the word violation. So what can the state do? I mean, so you
The state can potentially take, our ambulance is is regulated by the state. So the license for us to operate our ambulance is given to us by the state, and we apply for it, we pay our money, and there's an inspector, they come in and do the inspection for it. In order for Southampton to go down the road of paramedic, the state said, we don't want just anybody to say, you're going paramedic, and then not really try. So what they required was that the town, the selectmen, back what the fire chief was saying at the time, and come forward with an agreement. What is your plan? The state wanted to see a plan. The plan that they put forth was basically a 3-year, and it was a step into the full-time paramedic coverage. It doesn't, in that plan, it doesn't say there is stipulation that there will be paramedics at the station for 2 shifts, but it doesn't say that they have to be there for like that nighttime shift. So I actually feel the second shift, in our estimation, should hold this community for 10, possibly even 20 years into the future. It's not like we're going to be looking for a third shift in a couple of years kind of thing. That second shift would meet the state agreement that was signed by the selectmen at the time. And it would go from 6 a.m., and of course I'm jumping ahead here in some of his PowerPoint, but it would go from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. And that way, folks could, work another job, go out to dinner with their families, see a movie, and then come home and cover that nighttime shift. It's much easier to find folks available from 10 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, just because of how most jobs work. So the proposed second shift would be a good plan that should see Southampton through for a good 10 to 20 years without change, without additional costs, that kind of thing. Did that answer your question? Yeah, good question. Please ask.
All right, so, all right, moving on. Currently at nighttime, all of our personnel at the fire department are trained for EMS calls, and many, or I should say most, are fully fire trained also. Those of us that aren't fully fire trained, we have a couple of folks that are going through some training right now. Hampshire County actually has what's called a Basic 6 recruit program, where all Hampshire County fire departments are invited to send folks that are just starting out to get the basic classes of what it is to be a firefighter. I actually am one of the instructors for that program. I also happen to be a Mass Fire Academy instructor based out of Springfield. So I also am helping with in-house training for those folks as well.
I can interject there too. I just want to say that we do offer some pay incentives to, like if an EMT, a young Southampton kid gets their EMT and they come to the fire department, we can use that. We can get them into third rider ride-alongs, which is a requirement by our medical control so that they have patient contact time. We can get them as a functioning EMT for the ambulance. They can't drive the fire truck. But the fire service, Mass Fire Academy, offers free training that the town doesn't have to pay for, that the EMT doesn't have to pay for. And so, as he said, currently we've had a number of our men and women go through that program. We currently have 4 that are in that Hampshire 6. And just to make note that they're not getting paid by Southampton Fire Department to be there. They're doing it for the opportunity to get in there, to be affiliated with the fire department, and to, they maybe get a stipend when they come out the other side. But they're not getting paid during that program. So it's just
That's they're going to these programs, just to harp a little bit more on what the chief said. They're going to these programs on their own time, and that's exactly how. When I went through the Mass Fire Academy here, that's exactly how I did. So we have 4 currently in the Hampshire 6 program, which meets on Sundays for a consecutive 6 weeks. And we cover everything from how to put on your turnout gear for responding to a fire, to all the way up to how to stretch a hose into a house, into a building, and extinguish a fire. And at the end, they do go through a live fire evolution, where they are introduced to an actual fire that is controlled by the instructors, and they're tasked with with putting it out, with extinguishing it.
just if I may also, and I apologize to keep jumping in there. Thank you. We also, the fire training, 6 Sundays is really just the basic, and that's why they call it the basic 6. The Fire Academy does offer a firefighter academy for call volunteer departments. We historically have had 2 firefighters participate in that. They're, again, not paid. They do get a stipend increase at the end. And that gives them a national certification to what they call Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, which you can go anywhere in the country, and the level of training that you've received through that program is adequate for you to be on what they call an interior attack team. It gives you that level of training. And firefighting isn't just firefighting. I mean, it's hazardous materials, it's, propane gas, it's car fires. I mean, it's really a myriad of things that they'll do training for. That particular program, you could probably answer better than I. It's probably a 16-week program.
It's longer than that. It's the Mass Fire Academy Call Vol program, as it now stands, is 6 months worth of training. It meets 2 nights a week from 6:30 to 10, and every weekend for 6 months. And they cover everything from how to put on your personal protective equipment, which is our turnout gear that we wear, to how to extinguish a flammable gas fire. One of the classes that is during that program, you actually travel out to Stowe to the original Mass Fire Academy, which is just east of Worcester, and participate in what's called a flammable gas field day. What they've done is they've set up a flammable gas area out at the Fire Academy in Stowe, where they will set off LPG, liquid propane, and ignite it. And you have to put it out with a 20-pound fire extinguisher. That's all you have. And you can do it. You can do it. I've done it myself. It's a little daunting when you first approach that big fire and you go, this is going to put it out? Okay. But we do, as instructors, we do encourage and are right by the students every step of the way until they graduate. And like the chief said, when they graduate from that program, they do have a national certification that they can go anywhere in the country and it's recognized. So back to our PowerPoint here, we're working on that as well. We do have two people in the department that will be going through that program starting in July. And then all night shift personnel respond from home. We respond from home to the station. And this average response time for nighttime between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. is on average between 7 to 10 minutes. You'll recall that during the daytime it was 3 minutes and we're at your door. This is 7 to 10 minutes, and this is the ambulance leaving the station. We haven't arrived at your house yet. And this is under optimal street conditions. This means no snow, no rain, no fog, that it's going to make us drive a little bit more cautiously. So as you can see, that's an increase of almost double of what our response time is. So again, average response time is 7 to 10 minutes. All of our crews that are on call do carry, like I said earlier, a portable radio to alert them of a call. Currently, all of us in the room actually have our radios with us. As a call department, as we are now, we used to term the phrase, we never come off a shift. That has since is going away due to the modern lifestyles, which we'll get into in a minute. And we try to have a minimum of 2 EMT basics on each night to ensure that we can send at least the ambulance out to your house. And that way we are sending Southampton representatives to your house if you call us. So this gets greatly impacted. When I first started in 2007, we weren't given any standby pay. It was you get paid when the tones go out if you come in. And as the chief said earlier, and Megan, when she came on, we were assigned to a call shift. It was 3 of us. There was rotating teams of 3 people. And back then, it worked. Everybody lived in town. This was a secondary job. And it was actually my primary job for many years after graduating high school. I used to sit home like a lost puppy next to my radio, hoping it would go off so I could make some money for that day.
I was in high school, me too, but it
Yep.
wasn't a firefighter.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see how things have changed, and with modern lifestyles now, Southampton Fire really is everybody's second job. I myself, and I'm not trying to just toot my own horn here, I have 4 jobs, including this one that I take care, that I handle to just try and keep a roof over my family's head and food on the table. So the days of the call service are greatly diminishing because everybody needs more than one job now. 40-hour work week doesn't mean much anymore. And then paramedics sign on for covering nights when they're available. Like the chief said, we currently, I believe, we have 3 personnel who are paramedic level trained that are live in town, and that's the challenge for nighttime, for keeping that paramedic level, is keeping these folks in town for nighttime coverage. Because if we have them come from their homes, let's say they live in Westfield, they might live on the other side of Westfield. So, I mean, that's just an even greater response time to us getting out to the people that need us. And all people that cover the nights, they're in uniform and they're ready to respond at any time. I know personally, just a quick side note, my wife hates my radio. I'm not gonna lie. She really does not like it, but she understands that it's part of who I am. And like I said, I've grown up with it since 2007. My heart is totally behind all of this. I hope to be full-time fire someday, and I'm going to be starting my paramedic in the fall. So that just shows you how much time and dedication we all have into this. So anytime during their shift, anytime that radio goes off, they're ready to come in. So what does it take to become an EMT? An EMT course length is 120 to 150 hours of learning. This includes classroom learning and practical hands-on evolutions that they do. The cost per course now is $900 to $1,200. When I took it back in 2007, I took it in my senior year of high school. I paid out of pocket $600 was my EMT class. That was my cost. Now, as you can see, it's just about doubled. And this is the lowest level of pre-hospital care available. So this is the lowest level of care that you can receive outside of a hospital. An EMT Basic performs no invasive procedures. With that, we really can't do much outside of stabilize you, splint you, package you, get you in the ambulance, and get you to hospital. They're known as basic life support. And again, we basically stabilize, package the patient, and transport. So really with an EMT Basic, my job is to get to your house, get you out of your house, get you in my ambulance, and go to the hospital so that way I can get you to a doctor. That's essentially what an EMT Basic can do. We can do a couple of things such as bandage and basic wound care. So if you're bleeding, we can pretty much find out where you're bleeding from and try our best to stop it. Splinting, we can splint you if you've broken your arm, broken your leg, what have you. We can also give you Narcan, which is on this bottom corner of your screen here. That's used for overdoses. But again, after we administer the Narcan, we have to call for a paramedic unit to evaluate you. We can also give you an EpiPen, which is the next picture over. That's for anaphylactic shock. If you're allergic to bees, most people in town, there's a lot of people in town that are allergic to bees. I found over my almost 9 years career here. And everybody that has an allergy should have an EpiPen, in my opinion, but that's a different subject. After we give an EpiPen, what that's going to do is that's going to increase your heart rate, and that means that we have to call again for a paramedic unit to come and evaluate you. We can also give you aspirin if you're having chest pain, but once we give you the aspirin, we have to call for a paramedic unit to come and evaluate you. And lastly, we can give you glucose, which is used for treating diabetic emergencies. If your blood sugar drops too low, we can give you glucose and help you stabilize your blood sugar. But just with everything else, and to harp on it one more time, after we administer it, we have to call for a paramedic unit to come and evaluate you. So I'm done harping on that subject for a minute. So what does it take to become a paramedic? Megan, you know this all too well. 2 years of additional training to go from an EMT basic to a paramedic, and being an EMT basic is a requirement to go and get your paramedic. They have classroom time, hospital and clinical time is the same thing, where they're actually in the hospitals. They have to go through so many hours of being in an emergency room, seeing what comes in and treating the patients there. They have to work side by side with a nurse on a psychiatric unit for so many hours. They have to be in an obstetrics unit delivering babies for so many hours. All of this goes into play, and in addition to a couple of others. They have to go down into the surgery aspect of it to learn how to insert intubation tubes into people and intubate people who can't breathe on their own. That is all part of it. And then after they do all of that, after they've passed the classroom, the hospital time, they go into what's called ride time, where they ride with a paramedic level service in the area. And they have to complete so many hours of ride time in the back, being observed by a paramedic who's certified already. And I know a few paramedics that don't make it. So either in hospital time or in ride time, they drop out of the program. So actually getting through the whole program is quite a feat. And the cost of this program is, again, paid by the individual out of pocket. Like the chief said, it's $9,000 to $10,000. I don't know about any of you guys, but I know that I don't have that kind of money laying around. I wish I did, but I don't. So, and this is the highest level of pre-hospital care available. They have multiple procedures available, and they are referred to as advanced life support. So basically what they're doing is they're taking a mini emergency room and bringing it to your house, your bedside, the grocery store if you have an incident while you're grocery shopping, the bank, if you're out enjoying a movie at a movie theater, not that we have any in Southampton, but if you are enjoying a movie at a movie theater, maybe someday, they can come right to the seat you're in rather than having to wait and waste away time. So skills include, they can do everything that a basic level EMT can do, okay? So a paramedic can do everything that an EMT basic can do. In addition, they can also use a 12-lead cardiac monitor, which we have over here on the side table. They could do advanced airway such as intubation. They can chest decompression, which is if you're in a traumatic event and you pop a lung, they can insert a needle and get that lung working again momentarily. CPAP is used for anybody that has severe respiratory distress. They basically pressurize your airway to get oxygen moving down into your lungs again and into the alveoli and the lower molecular level of your lungs. They can give you medications, and they can also give you nebulizers as well as the CPAP for breathing troubles. They can administer an IV, they can administer an IO, which we'll get into in a minute and what that is. They have many, many more diagnostic skills at their disposal. Thank you, Chief. Brain didn't work there for a second. And they can also administer some pretty powerful drugs and narcotics to get you out of, such as out of a seizure. If you're seizing, they can actually give you a medication to stop your seizure right then and there. So here we have a couple of pictures. The top one is the cardiac monitor, which we carry. That's the LifePak 15, which is the same ones that we carry in our ambulances. One of the cool features of this is it basically takes a picture of your heart. And then the paramedics are trained to interpret the rhythm that prints out a strip. And those of you that are old enough to remember emergency, when Johnny and Roy would transmit that over to Rampart, and you'd see the blips on the screen, that is what they're able to interpret right there in the field. They don't need to call a doctor like Johnny and Roy did back in the TV show. And I know it's a TV show, but it's relevant. Aside from that, this is an IV. Anybody that's been in the emergency room has gotten an IV before. They can do that. The lower picture, lower left-hand side is of an intubation, and that is when you can't breathe on your own, you can't support your own breathing. They can actually drop a tube into your larynx in your throat and get you breathing again, get you oxygen down to your lungs. And then the IO lastly. So the IO, in cases of severe anaphylaxis